Welcome to The Bo Show, the home of faith, family, and freedom. I recently attended the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC for short, in Washington, D.C. The conference moved to Florida after the pandemic, since Florida largely stayed open for business. But this year, CPAC returned to its previous location in National Harbor, Maryland, just minutes away from the District of Columbia. I interviewed a number of the featured speakers at this conference, which included Dr. Ben Carson, the neurosurgeon turned Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. I wanted to get a sense of Dr. Carson's medical take on the vaccine problems, as well as his medical opinion on transgenderism, in terms of when the brain is developed enough to make a mature decision about reversing one's biological and anatomical composition. Here is Dr. Ben Carson.
Dr. Carson, so great to see you again here at CPAC 2023.
Thank you. Good to be with you again.
I want to first ask you a medical question as a medical doctor. You take the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm. Do you believe that the pharmaceutical industry, combined with elements of government, have done a fair amount of harm regarding COVID vaccines?
Oh, there's no question about it. All you have to do is know that the head of the FDA, when all this was going on, now sits on the board of Pfizer. And there was a lot of nefarious stuff going on. Suppression of other possible therapies, because you just wanted to push one thing, and then not being truthful about that thing and the complications associated with it. And it's really caused people, I think, to lose a lot of faith in government scientists. It's going to take a long time to get that trust back again. And that's the major damage that was done, not to mention the millions of people, or at least 1 million people who died, many of whom did not have to die.
Right. I agree with you. You know, you always have such an affable demeanor. You're always just even keel. And I've got to know, is there anything you see today that makes you angry?
I may get angry, but I probably don't manifest a lot of anger. But no, I am very disturbed by the fact that people want to give vaccines to children.
Right.
For COVID, because children have only a 0.025% risk of death or serious injury, and yet we have no idea what the long-term risk of giving them something that induces spike proteins, which may be around in their bodies for a long time and may result in some significant long-term issues. It's just ridiculous that we would do that. And it's only for profit, because when the CDC made the recommendation that children get it, Pfizer immediately increased the price, quadrupled the price. So yeah, they're making enormous profits on the backs of our children.
Dr. Carson, when Bill's safety, Damar Hamlin, collapsed, we saw, I think, a demonstration of faith that I have never seen before, at least in my lifetime that I can remember, especially when Dan Orlov prayed on air. I'm sure you remember that. What was your feeling, and did you have hope that despite attempts to make this society so secular, that God spoke to us in that moment?
Well, I think God speaks to us in every moment in lots of different ways. We just don't notice sometimes. But I was delighted to see so many people who never talk about God. All of a sudden, it was a big deal for them. Very much like I'm very thrilled to see what's going on at Asbury College right now. I mean, it's like Asbury versus Harvard. And, you know, bringing some common sense back, teaching people once again to love your neighbor, not to cancel your neighbor. I mean, these are the kinds of things that were so important in the development of our country. And one of the things that gave us strength and gave us identity. And so even if we have little brief episodes of it, as with Damar Hamlin, it's good. It's good that people are starting to think that way again.
And that's the cornerstone. You have the American Cornerstone Institute, and you've got this executive branch for America program. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of people don't go into government. They're kind of afraid. They don't understand it. And we wanted to give people some insight into the various agencies, particularly how the executive branch works, the budgeting process. Wanted to hear people's personal stories. We have interviews from many prominent people in the executive branch conducted by Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And we want people to not only go into government, but to hit the ground running, not to have to spend the first year, what's that and what's... Because the left has been very effective in getting their people to populate the career positions. 90% of the career positions are occupied by left-leaning people. They're the ones who push policies or slow policies down. So, you know, the Secretary of HUD or Energy may say, let's get this done, but, you know, they're the ones who say, we can kind of slow walk that.
It's a very unique program. I like that. That's a very good point. I think a lot of people probably don't know that so many people that have these career positions are of one particular ideology, which is why we see
Absolutely.
what's going on today. I want to ask you a tough question about transgenderism. You know, we know it's a movement. How do you balance the decency and autonomy of God's creation as a human being and their free will with this push to normalize and encourage transgenderism?
I think it's pure evil, to be honest with you. Children are naturally curious. What little girl hasn't put her father's tool belt on? Does that mean she wants to be a boy? What little boy hasn't slipped his foot in his mother's high heel just to see what it felt like? Does that mean he wants to be a girl? But if you've got people saying, yes, that's what it does mean. And what do you really think? And they're always pushing these ideals. Of course, a lot of children are going to be deceived by that.
Right.
And that's why so many who have gone down that path end up severely depressed. Suicides are high in that population. And it's child abuse to actually subject a child to something like that.
Since you studied the brain so much, I'm just curious, at what point in the brain's development would you say it's appropriate for a human being to start making choices of that nature?
Well,
who they are?
The brain does not mature until your mid-20s. So, you know, an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old is certainly not equipped to make those kinds of decisions. That's why they have parents. Parents to protect them, to guide them. And then you have these people who come in and psych out the parents, saying, do you want to really have a child who's unhappy and grows? And they psych the parents out. Parents have got to be smarter than this.
My final question, Dr. Carson, is do you ever plan to run for office again, and or would you serve in a future administration?
Well, I will always do what the Lord wants me to do, but I hope that's not it. I hope to be able to have an effect from the outside with programs like these. We have our Little Patriots program, which is really teaching the children the fundamentals of who we are as a nation and the real history, because your history is the basis of your identity, which is the basis of your beliefs. So we've got to get back and we've got to shore up all of that stuff if we're going to succeed as a nation.
Thank you, Dr. Carson. As always, thank you for your faith, for your passion, and everything you're doing, especially with the American Cornerstone Institute. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Always good to be with you.
Thank you.
From one generational leader to another, I also spoke with Riley Gaines Barker, a recent graduate of the University of Kentucky, where she was a competitive NCAA swimmer. She competed with and tied with transgender swimmer Leah Thomas, who was born a male but now competes with women and has received a unilateral acceptance and support without equivocation from the NCAA. In fact, there has been an institutional effort to stifle the conversation, thereby shutting down rational questions. If you can't ask questions, then there is no free speech. Here is Riley Gaines Barker.
Riley Gaines Barker, thank you so much for joining me here at NTD. I appreciate you coming by for CPAC 2023. Riley, you were a 12-time NCAA All-American swimmer at the University of Kentucky, and you tied for 5th place with male-born swimmer Leah Thomas in the 200-meter freestyle, correct?
Correct.
Walk me through what happened at the awards presentation. What happened to you?
So I'll take you back a little bit, actually, the day before. Leah Thomas, the first day, which I want to add, Leah Thomas was a male the previous 3 years of his collegiate experience at University of Pennsylvania. And when he swam as a male, the best he ranked was 462nd before winning a national title the day before we competed against each other in the 500 freestyle, beating out Olympians and American record holders and the most impressive female swimmers of all time. And so that second day we raced in the 200 free where we tied. And upon tying, the NCAA, you go behind the awards podium and they hand you a trophy and you get marched out and named an All-American. And so we go behind the awards podium and the NCAA official looks at us and says, "Great job, you guys tied, so we're going to give the trophy to Leah." And so I, of course, questioned them and I'm like, okay, I understand we tied, I understand there's one trophy, but why are you giving the trophy to Leah? What's your thought process? Yeah. And he said, "Well, we're just doing this in chronological order." And I say, "Okay, well, what are you being chronological about?" And he said, "Well, for photo purposes, Leah has to have the trophy. You can pose with the 6th place trophy, but you'll have to give it back and you go home empty-handed. Leah takes the trophy."
So let me stop right there. For photo purposes, Leah has to have the trophy.
Right.
That doesn't sound chronological. It doesn't sound like seniority.
No.
It doesn't sound like anything. Now, in the aftermath of that, you said that the NCAA has come out and given you a different reason.
Right. So rather than, are you insinuating the new guidelines they put in place now? Rather than after all of this dilemma and after I had taken my public stance and exposed the NCAA for this, rather than the NCAA creating guidelines that would just eliminate this from happening altogether by not allowing men to compete in women's sports, they've now created a rule for what happens when a tie occurs. And they did this to save their butts because the rule is now the trophy goes to whoever is older, which Leah Thomas is older than myself, and so they did this to save themselves. And then actually the NCAA packet this year for swimming, it's highlighted, bolded, big letters, and I've had a couple coaches send it to me and say, "Hey, you caused this, right?" So.
But when you were on the podium, you still had to sit in the 6th podium slot, right?
We got to stand together on the 5th place.
Okay.
But they handed me the 6th place trophy.
And you tied, so you
Right.
shouldn't have been the 6th place.
Right.
Well, the Kentucky legislature overrode Governor Beshear's veto of the Save Women's Sports Act, and you were present as a guest of one of the representatives. Do you think other states should do the same?
Absolutely. I think all states should make it a priority to protect women. The left likes to push, the media likes to push that this is a non-issue. It's not really happening. Why are we talking about this? Our state only has 4 transgender athletes. Why do you want to not include them? First of all, to believe it's a non-issue that couldn't be further from the truth. This is happening at all levels, all ages, all sports. Even in Texas, I was talking to a parent from Texas the other day on an airplane, and she told me her daughter's basketball team has 7 transgenders, so 7 males playing on her daughter's team. So to believe it's a non-issue that couldn't be further from the truth, my experience is not unique. It's just underreported. And so I believe all 50 states should take precedent on this issue. There have been 18 states thus far that have passed a fairness in women's sports bill, with lots more in the process of doing so this legislative cycle. And that's phenomenal, but we need to strive, of course, for 50 states. I understand this won't obviously happen overnight, and so I am very appreciative of the little steps we're taking to get to the bigger picture.
Well, you've certainly been a catalyst in it for sure by speaking out. Riley, I interviewed, when I was on a talk show a couple years ago, I interviewed a trans pilot who's as tall as I am. I'm 6'2", I think might have been 6'3", and who used to be a competitive skier. And she was like 6'3", and I was told, she, whatever you want to call it, told me that testosterone suppressants plus estrogen certainly weakened him when he transitioned. However, he did not think that NCAA students, collegiate athletes, should be competing unless it complied with the IOCC standards. So my question to you is, how can anyone say with accuracy that any testosterone suppressant and or estrogen makes the competition fair? How do you know?
We can't say that with accuracy. Actually, it's quite the opposite. There's so much data and science and proof that even with a year, 2 years on hormone suppressors, when you've gone through puberty, the implementations are irreversible. There are certain things that will never be fully diminished or mitigated. And the IOC's guidelines, I believe it's 10 nanomoles per liter of testosterone to be able to compete with the women. The average female is 0.8 to 1.2. So even those guidelines that are in place, it's 10 times the average female. Even still, females deserve more than losing out to mediocre males. So to answer your question,
You can't. It's not. There's no accurate measure.
there's no accurate measure.
It's playing scientist,
But
basically.
they like to say, the left likes to say, we have evolving science. That's actually exactly what the NCAA president Mark Emmert said when he doubled down in his stance of allowing Leah Thomas to compete with us. He claimed it was backed in evolving science. The science is evolving in this regard since it's a newer issue, but it's evolving in the side that I'm speaking on in my favor. We know that testosterone suppressions, yes, it will weaken you, of course. Leah Thomas would not be able to go the same times Will Thomas does.
Right.
But the performance gap between men and women is anywhere from 10 to 12% on average. It's not diminishing that number greatly. Maybe a little bit, but that performance gap is still there, and it's a large margin.
What does the word woman mean to you?
You know, I think it's crazy in our society that we have a sitting Supreme Court justice who chose not to say what it is to be a woman because she's not a biologist. And so the word woman has evolved to this controversial term, which is so sad for me. Being 22, I'm sitting back and I'm watching the left really try to blur the lines of gender and really try to erase women as a distinct category as a whole, which is terrible. I never ever would have considered myself a feminist, but I kind of joke now that I'm a modern day feminist, and what that entails is just simply fighting for equal opportunities, fighting for respect. Yes, men and women are equal, but we are not the same. And that's not to say that women are inferior. It's not to say that we're not capable of doing incredible things. But we need to be celebrated on our uniqueness, our own unique physical ceilings, not being compared physically to a male.
Tell me about your latest work with the Independent Women's Forum, what you're doing there.
Yeah, so I've kind of jumped on their team actually at the beginning of this year, and I've been doing a lot of different testifying and testimonies on state legislature in regards to the Fairness in Women's Sports Bill, as well as a new bill called the Women's Bill of Rights, which essentially defines what it is to be a woman, which is crazy we have to do.
Right.
But they've done some really great work there, and so I actually testified in Kansas a couple weeks ago, and the Women's Bill of Rights passed on the Senate side, and now it's being moved to the House side, so I'll be back Monday testifying in Kansas. I'm doing a lot of different college campus speeches, which I think is crucial to involve people who are my age, people in this 18 to 22-year-old range. These guys are our future. We need people to open their eyes, to see what's actually happening, to see the things that will affect them, their children. Because ultimately we're the ones who can fight this. We're the one who can make the changes. And so lots of college speeches, and I've really enjoyed that. This is a passion that I didn't even know I had. I was supposed to be in dental school this year, and so my life has totally been rerouted. But I'm passionate about fighting for this issue.
Well, my last question, it seems that many of your female competitors are scared to speak out against Leah, but have voiced their concern privately to you. So in addition to your work with IWF in terms of legislation and protecting women's sports, do you think there should be a way to protect athletes' free speech like yours without fear of repercussions, either in their own school or otherwise?
Absolutely, and that is something that I'm definitely trying to figure out the best way to handle. That, to me, this whole fairness in women's sports issue, it's not as big as a problem as the freedom of speech issue that these athletes are dealing with, especially Leah Thomas's teammates. I've talked to many of them privately, of course, and when they tell me what they went through all last year, they had to go to mandatory LGBTQ meetings. When they sent emails to their administration being concerned about the locker room, their administration responded back with, if you're uncomfortable seeing male genitalia, here are some counseling resources that you should seek. And then, of course, we're referred to the campus LGBTQ Education Center. They were told that their school has already made their stance for them, so no need to worry about using your voice. They were told that they will never get into grad school. You will lose you'll never get a job. You will lose your friends. All of these scare tactics into making these girls terrified to speak out. They don't want dialogue. They don't want to be questioned. But that's a problem. If we've reached a point in our society where we can't even ask questions, it shows the absolute tyranny that our government possesses. And I think it shows that there's ulterior motives in what they're trying to achieve when you can't even question the process, a process that you're directly related in. And so I definitely am trying to figure out a way to ban athletes, not even just athletes, parents. I have so many parents reach out to me who are terrified to speak out because they don't want to lose their job. Banning athletic directors, people within these institutions who know this is wrong. I've had so many of them reach out to me and say, "Hey, I support you, but I can't do it publicly because I will face retaliation from the NCAA." So I'm trying to figure out the best way to band us together and show that we are the true majority here. We're catering to half a percentage of the population at the expense of 51% of the population. Women make up 51% of the world. So we are the collateral damage in this, catering to the minority, the overwhelming minority.
It looks like DeSantis may be onto something with this digital bill of rights. I don't know if you've heard about, but he's trying to protect fairness in speech as well. So to me, Riley, I see it's two issues. It's one, it's protecting the competition of you as an athlete, but it's also protecting the ability to speak out against an injustice. And those are two separate issues, but they both have to be approached with the same aptitude and the same zeal, I guess.
Absolutely. It's crucial. It's crucial that we protect speech. That's what this country was founded on. And so now that we're losing that, people need to see that we're losing that. They deserve to see that we're losing that.
Well, Riley, thank you so much for stopping by today and letting us know exactly what's going on. And where can people find out how to work with you, or if women want to join IWF, how would they do that?
Yes, so you can go to www.iwf.org, and they have phenomenal resources and links, education tools. They really do an awesome job of posting all kinds of issues that affect women and what they're doing about it. You can also follow along my Twitter, which is Riley_Gaines_, and I as well try to post breaking stories. I try to help the public see what these state and local politicians and Congress members are doing. Whether it's good or bad, I try and post breaking stories of this happening to athletes so people don't believe the narrative that it's not actually happening. But I appreciate you for allowing me to continue shedding light on my story, and so I'm really grateful.
Well, it looks like there's a bright future ahead of you, and I just think that there's so many young women out there like yourself, and I don't know why we're having to have this conversation, but it must be had.
Absolutely.
There's no way around it, so thank you, Riley, for your passion.
Of course,
Thanks.
of course. Thank you.
Appreciate it.